Hi, Dave Glatley here from sunny Naples, Florida. We're down here visiting our 7,000 members that reside either part time or full time here in Florida. This is our third stop, and we have three more to go. And don't feel bad for us suffering in our 70, 80-degree temperatures. We're doing the best we can for the company. I'm here to welcome you to tonight's membership live stream. It's an exciting time. And you know, the Northern Masonic jurisdiction's goal is to take care of our members. And that's what we do, whether it's our members in trouble or our members to make sure they have a good time and enjoy their Scottish Rite experience, or even taking care of new members that join. I hope you enjoy tonight's experience with membership. Now, we're going to debut for you tonight our new video called Nice Guys. We were able to show it to the Conference of Grand Masters last week, and I know you're going to enjoy it. It not only is a membership recruitment tool, but it's also an excitement for our members tool. So I know I'm proud to be a Scottish Rite Mason, and I hope you are. Please enjoy tonight's live stream.
Thanks, Commander, and thank all of you for joining us on tonight's live stream, entitled, Do Nice Guys Really Finish Last? I'm George Taylor, Director of Membership for the Scottish Rite Northern Masonic Jurisdiction, and I found three nice guys to join me in this live stream tonight. First off, we have Doug Kaler, past Grand Master of Masons in Ohio and Deputy for the state of Ohio. We also have Wayne Spooner, who is the Grand Chaplain for the Grand Lodge of Illinois and also the COD Membership Chairman for Illinois, and Sandy Karstens, who's the Grand Lecturer for the state of Grand Lodge of Vermont and the COD Membership Chairman for Vermont. Commander Glatley mentioned a video that we're going to show you this evening. But what we want to do first is kind of put a context around what that video is and why we put those resources into the program, Not Just a Man and Mason, and the video Nice Guys. So take a look.
There's a narrative out there about what Freemasons are. Well, there is a better way to tell the story from our perspective, not letting the world decide who we are and what we are. And in our series, it's our hope to make Freemasons proud and remember why we joined this great institution.
It is very important for men today to have that brotherhood. It's in their system, it's part of who they are. And that's one of the greatest feelings in the world, to be able to trust a fellow brother, especially a Mason. You took a pledge to be loyal to that brother. And I think that all men crave that same thing today.
We're on set and we are telling a story and showing the real roots and the real values of Masonry in a way that we really haven't seen too often before this.
This is about inspiring men to be the best that they can be. It is the call to arms in a way. Be a Mason in society today. Be who you are. Live the values. Be the beacon. Be the force for good in the world.
Anytime you're working with someone who's trying to make a positive difference, that means a lot. I got kids and they're going to inherit this place, and to see someone out there who really cares to try to make a difference is nice. They're good people, so it feels good to help them with their mission.
At ACE, we produce a lot of projects working with a lot of different companies and brands, but it's rare that we actually get to produce content that can help and impact people in a positive way.
We're helping one of the oldest and most important organizations revive and really truly take its rightful place in the world again. It's happening, and we see it happening since we started this, and it's been a privilege to play a small part in it.
For an organization as far as they go back to be able to embrace video and embrace social media and bridge the gap between the old days and the contemporary man now, and for us to be able to deliver that message has been amazing.
We know as Masons that there is something bigger and there's something better that we're supposed to be working towards all the time. What better imagery than this to show just how big we can be if we really try.
And now the premiere of Nice Guys.
Some people say, and they say it a lot, that nice guys don't finish first. So maybe it's time to reconsider what it means to be first.
It's about being your best, but knowing you could be even better.
It's being present, but respectful of history.
Want to take that back?
Yeah.
I think you should.
Good job. Okay, now go ahead, circle it. It's donating something more valuable than money.
It's believing in yourself and something bigger.
It's coming from different families, but treating each other like brothers.
It's not just being a man, it's being a Mason.
So, brothers, after seeing that video, what was your knee-jerk reaction when you saw that?
I was struck by the boxer at the beginning, because we're talking about nice guys, and I really didn't expect to see the boxing ring and the guy standing there. But when he said, it's about being your best and then knowing you can be even better, that was very striking, I thought. That one's...
Absolutely. The nod to being very present, enjoying life, being a part of everything that you do on a day-to-day basis, but remember that you're connected to history, and that reverence for and that enjoyment of there's people that came this way before us, and given that nod. I thought that was a powerful part of the video.
I love the closing with that whole bit with that guy up on the mountain, and just sort of giving you that sense of that struggle and constantly working towards where you want to be and saying, this is something I can do, and my goodness, I can do this. And look at the view, it just inspires you with that sense. So that closeout for me was just beautiful, absolutely beautiful.
Thank you.
I like that.
It's like being something bigger than yourself. I mean, how better can you illustrate that than to be on top of the mountain and looking out over that horizon?
And I think that's important too, because we always sort of think that there's that sense of that divine presence, always knowing there is something bigger than yourself in that larger scheme. And this is what happens with people. They sort of imagine that, oh, well, this is all I have to answer for. But there's something to be said for that larger picture outside of you that draws you forth. That's what I think this kind of thing does.
Right. And that scene at the end where he's talking about we're not necessarily from the same family, but we're brothers. Yeah. That piggybacks on that, the fact that we are here together. We are on this journey together, and we all recognize that there's something bigger. There's something bigger that we can be doing as individuals, as well as partnering together. Right.
And what a safe place for people to be in. And that's what I like about the fraternity, is by actually being able to see different walks of life, different age groups, all of these people in one place, all trying to learn to get together and do something for the greater good. What an experience that is, because a lot of people come from something very narrow. They don't see somebody else in a different walk of life. What a great experience for them.
At the commander's comment, he talked about trust and loyalty. And what better place do you find trust than in a Masonic lodge?
Absolutely.
Or in a valley setting. So, yeah.
One of the things that we talked about a little bit before the video was that thought of, we're all brothers. We're not strangers here, right. And we can go anywhere in the world to a Masonic lodge or a Masonic building, and we're surrounded by friends and brothers. We just haven't met them yet. And Wayne, I think that was you that kind of it struck that chord with me. And as we are traveling men, it's really interesting to.
Well, when we think about truly being connected as one fraternal body across the seas, across the oceans, and when we talk about visiting lodges, especially for newer people in the fraternity, there can be some apprehension. I'm walking in a group, I'm not sure if and it's like, hey, one thing I learned from, say, a very seasoned brother, is that there are no strangers amongst Freemasons. They are just brothers and friends you have yet to meet. And it literally, looking at the individual I was chatting with, it literally calmed him. It's like, yeah, that's actually it. We are connected.
And think about that, going to another city or visiting another country, wherever you go, you've got that sense that you can walk into a lodge and all of a sudden you have that common bond. Everybody knows they've got that same experience, and all of a sudden you realize, wow, these guys are great. They just that warm sense of safety that you've now connected. What an experience that is. That's just absolutely spectacular.
So let's break into this, the nice guys theme. What are nice guys? Or who are nice guys?
Well, obviously, we're nice guys.
Yes, thank you very much. You're very well appreciated.
No, you know, I'll be honest. When I first saw that, I really questioned it, because I thought about, do nice guys really finish first? And it really does. I think the real question is, how do you define what that really means?
Absolutely.
And because if I go with what I've learned as a Mason, and what I've learned in Scottish Rite, I have a definition of what it means to be a good man, to be a nice guy. And if I live up to that obligation, I have nothing to be concerned about or worried about. I mean, that's how it struck me. But that's why I also liked the boxer at the beginning, because you think about nice guys and they're a little nice, and then here's this guy up there and he's in the boxing ring and he's ready to knock your block off. I like that.
I think that's the thing. They're trying to co-opt the definition here to make people realize that the connotation of the word sends people to a certain place that says, oh, they're kind of like a doormat. They're easy walked on and so on. And I think there's a certain point that we have to change that definition and to say, look, it means a lot more. In fact, it means people that have a certain amount of integrity. They're nice. They've got an etiquette, the way in which they speak. There's a civility that's associated with them. We hear several of the talking point bulletins have talked about civility. And these are the sorts of things that we get reminded of. That's where you start seeing this idea of nice. You know, it's not a doormat. It's somebody that actually is comfortable with themselves, that they can basically feel, you know, anything that comes their way, hey, I can handle this.
And we learn fortitude and the courage. And many times it's to be that lone voice when others are running a certain direction, says, wait a second. And this is one of the things you learn within our lodges as well as Scottish Rite, is you have the strength to say, no, there is an appropriate way. Your integrity steps forward. And basically, you're reminded not to compromise your values. That is about that. And then also to realize that through my example, we impact people's lives. We help change people in terms of giving them inspiration, giving them example. All of those things are huge in terms of what is truly being first.
And that's what I kind of like about that, is that we are, in a sense, if you want to use the term, we're soldiers that go out to the world to give that shining example of what we profess and are able to accomplish within our lodges to show the outside world, wow, this is how it can be done.
So, in your opinions, and you are well-traveled men, where do we find these nice guys?
Oh, they're all over. If you really think in terms of being able to have a conversation with someone and them feel comfortable sharing their story of what's their why, you know, what's their purpose, you know, how driven are they by an inside voice, all of those things to me have been an element of nice guys. And what you find within Masonry, when we sit down and we have conversations like this, you know, mouth to ear, good discussions, you find and hear that why. You find that purpose. And usually people that have that inner purpose, there's something that's driving them. That is part of that inner.
And I think that's the thing in going out into the public, in realizing that we understand that sort of why within our own fraternity. But you also know when you confront other of your friends that aren't Masons, you kind of run into them and say, you know, there's a quality about this person that really I get. This is really good. And there's your cue for an individual that might be interested in joining the fraternity.
You know, I think there are times in a man's life when he's more open. And so I think most men are good men at heart. But life is getting in the way. They're busy in school. They're starting a career. They have young kids or whatever it is. But there is a time when they're going to look around for something bigger, something beyond the usual facts of daily living, and they're going to be open to the fraternity at that point. And they're going to look and they're going to say, I want to be like him.
Right.
Yes.
And that's the point at which you can have that conversation and hopefully make a new Mason.
And then one other piece, because we know so many Masons that are good men, we know they're out there. We absolutely know they're out there. They may not have found us yet, And doing things like what we're doing here allows people to be more exposed to what Masonry really is. And that then awakens, aha, I knew I was looking for something.
Yes.
And then they come to us.
Right. You know, I'd like to be able to say to everybody, you know you're a Mason in your heart before you ever knock on the door. Right?
We all know that.
But that's a message that I'd like to see us get across is when you're there and you're looking and you want to build something bigger for your family, for your community, you want to make a difference in people's lives, and you want to make yourself better in the process, you're ready to be a Mason. So.
And we're told that many of the young people out there are looking for something like this.
Absolutely.
This is the thing, and they're actually shying away from the institutionalized spiritual centers, the so-called churches. Now they're kind of saying, I don't want to be a part of that, I'm not liking what I'm seeing, but I really need to grow spiritually. Oh my goodness, we've got a place for you. This is it, right here. And by the way, we take in all kinds of religions in here. We've got that ecumenical feature that nowhere else in the world has. This is stunning. You come into the lodge and you may have 3 or 4 different volumes of sacred law. And you go, my goodness, how can this be?
Exactly.
There's no place in the world that does that.
Right.
Well, and you bring up an interesting point. You know, we're very open when it comes to religion and to race and to creed and all of that. So, you know, how does that fit into our conversations around nice guys and around Freemasonry, and what do how can we continue to teach that in a world that's so divisive sometimes?
Well, many people talk about the secrets of Freemasonry. Well, one of the quote unquote secrets is the fact that through your journey as a Mason, you will connect with people who on life's journey otherwise you would never cross paths. People that are 20 years your senior, 20 years your junior, different career, different perspective, and you have an opportunity to meet and do what we're doing here, just have a conversation, share a life's perspective, because that's how we reduce the they in the world and realize that we're all connected.
Absolutely, I love that. And in fact, that experience where you kind of learn something about that person's walk of life, their shoes as it were, all of a sudden that empathy starts growing. You realize it's not a they. Oh wow, I understand you better, so I understand the broader perspective of humanity by seeing that in the small sense.
And that was the nice thing about the video, the way the video ends with all those men together, welcoming each other, obviously glad to see each other again, and that sense of joy and fellowship is a very real experience when you go into a lodge, and I think that whole idea of bringing together men from all walks of life is one of our great strengths. It's one of the unique features of Freemasonry. We don't care about your religion. We don't care about your politics. We don't care about how much money you make. But we do care that you're a good man.
Yes.
And we do care that your word means something.
Oh, that's huge.
You know, and that's we have an ideal position. We just need to tell people about it and let them see it again.
One of the, as you were talking, one of the things that kind of popped into my head is, when you surround yourself by men of different, personalities and whatnot, you also make yourself a little vulnerable. And I think one of the things that I've experienced, and one of the things that we can all speak to is it is a safe area that we can be vulnerable, but not compromise our masculinity.
Right.
Absolutely. There are times when you can have a conversation and be able to touch on something that might seem sensitive, but it's coming from the right place, from a sense of, I want to understand this better. And let's learn and grow together through these conversations. So it isn't pointing at, it's actually sitting and saying, let's learn together. That's then when there's an honesty there. There's actually someone wants to learn. And oh, by the way, we can learn together. And that's a huge part of that development, finding of that truth, and all of those things. And oh, by the way, it's an opportunity to what we call pay it forward.
Absolutely. one of the questions that we have. So we've got our viewers out here that are asking questions, and Andrew asks, does one sometimes have to bend the rules to get ahead?
Well, are we talking about in life, or
when we talk about nice guys?
No,
right?
I think I mean, I know exactly. I mean, the stock answer I think would be that people bend rules all the time, but that doesn't mean that you have to do that. And I think the challenge for all of us is everybody faces that same question every day. And where is your moral compass, and where is it pointing, and what are the obligations that you've taken to your own character, and when is it important to walk away from something? When is it important to stand back and just say, I can't do this anymore, or I'm not going to do this? You mentioned that before.
Absolutely.
You have the power and the strength and the courage to say no.
Absolutely.
And so I think, Andrew, that would be my comment is, yeah, every day we face that same temptation, but if you have confidence in yourself and in what you believe in, it will be the guide to making those decisions.
I always think of these things a little bit like investments too. That you can go for the short-term gain and sure bend the rules for today, but ultimately you might lose the long-term goal. And as you go through those stages and keep sort of bending the rules, you kind of do damage to yourself over time. So yeah, you might lose that particular one because you didn't bend the rules, but in the long run, people are going to say, that's the guy I want on my team, and that's the person that, if you will, wins.
Also in the broader world, regardless if you're in business or academia, et cetera, we don't accomplish everything alone. So being able to collaborate with people, they actually believe in your word, that you're actually someone that's credible, you win in the long term. Actually in the short term too, because you can exchange ideas, get smarter faster, and come up with better solutions. So you got to be able to collaborate. Or not, your brand is not really worth that much. And that's not just for companies, that's for individuals as well.
Well, and that's a great point, Wayne. How do we kind of translate some of the lessons that we learn in the Blue Lodge and in our different appendant bodies out into real life and real world? And how does that help us in the corporate setting or in the personal setting?
You know, I mean, from my perspective, these may be kind of run-of-the-mill sounding, but just the experience of, first of all, being able to go through ritual over time transforms you in a way in which you're actually find a certain amount of confidence in yourself more than you might have before. I find decorum. When you realize that there's ways to sort of do things, yeah, you're following some rules that we've got in our lodges, but you realize all of a sudden you go out into the real world and you're finding similar rules, and I see other people kind of fumbling around. They're not quite familiar with how to deal with it, and you just come right in and say, this is something, I've done this, I get how to do this. So there's a sense of that sort of rule, decorum, following that we're so good at that you go out into the real world and you realize, oh, it's there too, but people they're not quite there yet, and you're all over it.
Also, we're workmen in the quarry. If you think about it from our more operative basis, we just roll up our sleeves and get it done.
Yeah.
So the concept of teamwork, hello. I mean, those are key elements of what we do.
And you start small and you grow. And so throughout, as you move through various offices, as you take different parts and degrees, you start with the small part and you learn how to do it, and then you go to a bigger part and a higher station in our higher office in the lodge, and so it is a progressive process there. I mean, you put in your time and you put in your labor, and then it pays off when you go into the workplace.
I mean, every one of us has probably experienced that. New candidates has come through and looked at you and said, my gosh, I could never do that. How did you do that? And then within a year's time, they're doing it too. Now, look at what you just did to that man. Look at the confidence that they didn't think they could do this before, and now all of a sudden they've just acquired some abilities and skills they didn't think they could do. That is just, you can't trade that for anything.
And when you're a manager or a people leader out in the world, being able to observe people's talents, helping them to see how much they've progressed and the confidence, because sometimes when you're so far in the weeds, you don't see it. But when you have someone like the mentors that you have within Masonry that can point those things out, says, can you take a look back at the person you was 6 months ago? Okay? And then it's like, wow, yeah, I have come a long way. That breeds confidence. And again, you can take that out into other parts of your life.
And I want to connect with that, just the mentoring. Every one of us is probably mentored. How much fun is that?
Oh, yeah.
And how much do you learn yourself from going through that process? And just, it's like, oh, I can't wait to tell you about this. And oh, this is going on, and let me help you with that. And it's like a little kid that you're kind of growing. But it's so valuable for you as well.
Yes.
And that's a message I want to send out to all of our viewers, to understand that being a mentor is not for some special class of people. It's everybody's job.
Well, and it never ends, because
it never ends.
I still call other men and say, listen to this, what am I supposed to do about this group or that group or this person or something? Have you ever faced this?
Yeah.
And that's 30 years down the road. I've still got mentors that I look up to.
But also, you're humble. If you remember that you're a student, to your point, you remain humble. You remain approachable, so that other people can come to you to be that mentor, because they see you. It's like, no, this person isn't perfect. It's like, no, we are rough, Ashlers, trust me.
Yes, a very important point, to recognize that we have our flaws. And the admission of that is sometimes hard for people. And I think that's one of the things that, again, getting back to the safe place of the lodge and the brothers, that you have that place to be able to sort of say, ooh, I kind of didn't do that very well. And that's okay. You're in a place to learn better.
One of the questions that came in a little bit earlier was, how do we evolve being a man without feeling like we're giving up our masculinity? And it kind of speaks to what you were just talking about, Sandy.
Yeah, I always sort of think back on the chivalry days, because we always think about being a man, that chivalry, knights and whatever. And I bring us to our friend Constance. This is a person that all the knights actually self-reflect. There is a vigil for knights. They actually did this. And they have to reflect on their experience, their connection with their deity. And ultimately, what are they going to be? They're going to be knights. But at the same, they're not sacrificing their masculinity, but what they're reflecting on are all those values that they're expected to be as a knight. Integrity, honesty, forthright, fortitude, all of these things are part of what gain your masculinity. You're not trading anything, you're gaining. You're gaining stuff.
Well, and I guess I don't even see it as a conflict, because we are working men in one way, shape, or form. And my grandfather owned a gas station, and we worked on cars, and we used, we did all this kind of activity. And I can, when I go to lodge, it's still the same thing. It's still there's still jobs to do. There's still work to perform. Yeah. It's not about being a man or not. It's just about being who you are and being the best that you can do. Be.
And the values that we share. You mentioned a number of them: honesty, integrity, equality, freedom, brotherly love, learning, service to mankind. Those things give us a platform to be able to stand on, that says, regardless of what I might choose to do in a moment, that's who I am, unapologetically. Then from there, it's how do we work together? How do we figure out a common solution? And by the way, can we celebrate when we're successful?
There you go.
It's all of those things are very key. And then also within the quiet of the lodge, when we shut out the world, we actually can be what we're called speculative. We can speculate, we can think, we can actually contemplate. And oh, by the way, that's how we grow wisdom. And those are the things that, again, you acquire over time, but it's purposeful how you do that. And that helps us grow and develop. And when you have that inner strength, trust me, folks know that you're not the one.
And then you go out at the end for refreshment.
Oh, absolutely.
After the meeting is over, or after the reunion is finished up, and you celebrate a bit, and you let your hair down, if you will, and that's the time, a lot of times, when you really hear about the issues and the things that are going on in people's lives, and you talk about what's happening with the kids, and you talk about what's going on with the wife, or if you've got a sick parent, or if something's not going well at work, and so that the lessons we've learned and the thoughtfulness and the mindfulness that we put into it in the lodge room then washes over into our daily lives.
Absolutely.
So getting back to the question, what was his name?
Oh, I'm sorry, that was Dan.
Dan, I don't think there's any trading. I don't think there's somehow we have to lose some masculinity. We're starting and building it. We're making it stronger and better than you might have expected it could be. So I don't think there's any I don't see, like I said, I don't see any conflict here. It's just, you just get better.
Right. And also, regardless of what your style is, whether you're someone that's more outgoing or someone more reserved, it doesn't matter, because your conviction speaks beyond your personality or style. And that is what makes you a man. And clearly, that's a foundation of being an upright man and Mason.
I like that.
That's exactly right.
We've got another question coming in from John. How does legacy impact Freemasonry and masculinity in general?
Legacy, what would that?
Like I'm a third generation Mason?
Or I think it speaks to that, and I don't want to speak for John, but what about creating a legacy and kind of leaving that legacy behind? I think we touched on a little bit with mentorship and kind of sharing those experiences.
Well, one thing that, again, this is not specific to Masonry, is when we think about being able to impact people's lives, like through mentorship or being a professor, and some of the other roles that we have, when we actually can influence someone to the point where they choose to change themselves, a bit of us lives on in them. And therefore that concept of truly a broader sense of immortality really exists. And that is an element of legacy that isn't just by blood, and as well as it's beyond just even your lodge. And that's what Brother Masons have been doing for centuries.
Right. Well, and at a different level, look at our Grand Almoners Fund. I mean, that's a gift that's a legacy. The brethren of our past and of the last decade have really put together a Grand Almoners Fund, and they're going out and they're helping people every day, and that's going to affect thousands of lives of those people that have been helped. But it also is a gift that's going to continue into the future. I mean, it's really about our integrity and our credibility that we've found a way to put our values to work.
And another thing that we like to do is to use our tools as sort of metaphors for bettering ourselves, the chisel, as we work away on our ashlar, so to speak. And I like to think of that as not just a personal sort of goal, but also we're working on the very lodge we're in. Each one of us is a part of that lodge. So we are using our own implements, if you will, to chisel the ashlar of the lodge, to make it better. Your contribution creates that legacy. You say, wow, that was the guy who helped to put together the mentor program, or that was the person that really built us, the way to do our degrees better, things like this. You invest that time. That's the legacy. It's you and the lodge, and then beyond that.
And the beyond that is when you take that improved brother, you actually go out into your communities, guess what? Your families benefit from that.
Right.
There's
the legacy right there.
Wherever you work, the various other things you do in terms of community, all of those benefit. So how we improve the world? Take a good man and bring him out into the world through what they learn through Masonry.
Nice, yeah.
And that's how you improve. And oh, by the way, you get a whole lot of us going out into the world. That's how you can really make an impact on the communities.
Talking about impact on the community, we've got Brendan F., who submitted a question here. How does society, news, media trends, etc., impact the masculine identity? And how can we as Freemasons have an impact on that?
Well, let's see. The point about what the broader community, broader society wants to paint a picture. First of all, if you're watching the evening news, turn the TV off, please, because that's not the depiction of what really good men are about. So part of that is also being visible. That says we exist. There's proof that good men exist because we exist. And oh, by the way, we didn't just show up yesterday. We've been around a while. And those timeless elements that are truly bedrocks to Freemasonry, brotherly love, relief, and truth, and how we interact, that is what will really tell the story. And I know we talked earlier about the concept of we need to reclaim the message about Freemasonry.
Right.
We need to tell our narrative, and that's what's, again, these videos are huge in helping to do that.
And I think that's the idea, is the reclaiming. So whether it's the fraternity itself, or whether it's what it means to be a nice guy, or what it means to be a man in society, we're always going to be surrounded by the images that say otherwise. This is our image that we have in a couple of degrees that use basically the sword and the trowel, right? We've got two things. The trowel is for building, and we've got the sword to kind of defend against these other things that are always going to be out there. We have to be vigilant, but us not doing anything is not the answer. And I think this is what I like about our whole program.
Well, but the truth of the fact is that television and radio and YouTube and everything else paints a picture both of men and of women. Women have the same problem with in terms of body image and defining who they are. I think for us, it becomes a case, first of all, it's one man at a time. You know, it's how you act, how you interact with people. That idea of people looking at you and by the quality of your character, by your behavior, by the integrity of your actions, you influence other people. And then our challenge is to take that farther, take advantage of social media, take advantage of our television and of Facebook and all of those sources to tell a story that's positive, that's honest, and that shows really the possibilities of man and of mankind.
Right.
And I think that's what we can do.
And part of this is also goes back to that nod to history. When we think about, there's no coincidence that some of the true pillars of history happen to have been Freemasons, because those same things around the values resonated with them and gave them that strength to do the things that they did. For them to see possibility at times that others would say, no, there's nothing that's possible within society in terms of making real impact and change. All of those things, we have a track record of doing these. And guess what? Who are the ones that's going to lead us forward? What do you think?
Well, and that leads right into the next comment that I have is, we talked about YouTube, we talked about social media. 100 years ago, we didn't have YouTube and social media, but we had Freemasons. 200 years ago, we didn't have the things that we had. And so, how do we kind of navigate through history and through the evolution of different technologies and still remain constant to our core values?
I think that's the whole idea, is that we have those core values. They've been invariant since the dawn of time. They've always been there, and I think it is just that won't change. It's how we deliver it that will, and I think it's just being cognizant of these different media. In 20, 50 years from now, there'll be a whole different thing that we have to confront. So it's staying true to our core and figuring out how to interact with those new technologies. I think it's just taken a while because it goes so fast to kind of get caught up and realize, okay, guess what? We can't be working with telegrams anymore. We got to work with some of the modern stuff. So we get on board, and now we just have to deal with it from that perspective. The core stuff is still there. It's just getting that message out.
Absolutely.
And in some cases, we want to go back to the old technologies. I mean, in lodge buildings, in Ohio, we see lecture charts again. And a 19th century technology now being put to use again because it's meaningful to the members. And I think that's ultimately the real key is, what is effective communication? And we will adopt anything that's effective communication as long as we stay true to our core values. We're present but respectful of history.
Absolutely.
I think that was the word from the movie, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And when we think about, let's pick one of those, the concept of opportunities for fellowship. Well, when some of us, kind of rewind the clock, for those of us a bit more seasoned, well, what did we do relative to social activity when we were in the 20s? Well, guess what? That looked a little different in our 40s, in our 60s, in our 80s. So that's really what it is. So when we think about who's in our lodges, well, we've got people in their late teens through their early 20s, all the way up to folks over 100 years old. Socialization and fellowship looks a little different for folks.
Oh, yeah.
All right? But it's the same thing. And now through tools like this, we get a chance to connect virtually. And we've heard a lot of that through the great work that's been done through the Path Forward. And that's what we're looking to do. How do you connect in this day and age? We still want fellowship, but just how do you do it now?
Right. And what that develops is a strong sense of adaptability and versatility. By being able to adapt to all these different changes, you actually learn something yourself in your ability to go into the workplace or wherever you are and realize that not everybody is so flexible. But you have that experience. When things change, are you actually able to kind of adapt? And despite the cliche, yeah, Masons can change. And in fact, there's a lot of opportunities for that to kind of happen. And I think you're the better off for it. And again, that's another strength for us.
Now it's the question of how do we change? There had to be brothers at various points throughout history that helped us do that translation, to help us leapfrog through time. So guess what? For all the brothers that's watching this, why aren't you that guy? Why aren't you the one that's helping us translate how we move forward? How about charting the future? Because guess what? There were brothers like us way back in the day that actually got us to where we are now. They didn't have anything magical other than some really good working tools and some cool brothers.
You know, and I think the other piece that goes with that is it doesn't happen overnight.
No.
And probably all these different technologies sit side by side for years.
Absolutely.
And because we're not one group, we have, we're many different men with many different interests and backgrounds, and so what works for one man won't necessarily work for another. But there's another option here for communication. There are fellas that'll want to be in the lodge room, rubbing shoulders. There'll be fellas that would much rather be doing this at 3 o'clock in the morning, communicating with a Mason in Afghanistan who's in the service or something like that, and we have places for all of them. So.
You kind of touched on military,
right?
And one of the stories that we were talking about a little bit before this was your experience with fellow men and Masons in Ohio and their military experience.
Right.
How does that kind of relate to?
Well, I first of all, I was not in the military, and I don't want to leave that impression. But I've been receiving a lot of communications from veterans who are coming back out of the service, and they're looking for ways to maintain a sense of camaraderie, of fellowship, of brotherhood, something that they experienced when they were in the service, and they had to rely on the man next to them. And when they get out into the world, they're not necessarily finding that. Business is competitive or too cutthroat. Where do I go to find men who will have my back? And we've had several men who've talked about they found that in the Masons, or they're looking for it. They were told about Freemasonry while they were on active duty. Now they've come home. The one fellow wrote me and said, "I'm now home, and I believe that I'm stronger by the men that surround me. And if I can surround myself with good men, I will be a better man myself, and I'll be able to make a better contribution to society." And I said, "Oh my gosh, that's our message. We need to grab that guy and hold on to him." But yeah, I think there is an affinity between the values of Freemasonry and the brotherhood piece and the experiences that our servicemen had. Now I know the males from the service have our lodges to come to. I'm not quite sure what our women veterans, what their options are, but I hope that there are organizations for women that are fraternal, and I hope that they are opening their doors too. So.
Sure. Absolutely. Sandy, you work on a college campus as in your professional life. How does this concept of nice guys and masculinity, how have you seen that kind of evolve over the years and kind of shaped when you first started teaching versus kind of where you are now?
What's interesting is, obviously they're kind of like it's a birth for them because they're coming out of home and into the real world. And despite whatever they've learned from their circumstances at home, they're really coming into a whole new platform and learning what it means to be a man now on my own they're surrounded by a lot of other messages, as we know, on a college campus. So, what you see over time is, I think in the early days there was maybe a little bit more of a traditional sort of expectation, and we sort of see the ramifications of that in today's society, with men kind of not figuring out what to do. And I think in a sense we're in a perfect position to help to redefine that for them. So the fraternity is an ideal place for some of these young men to start figuring out, what does it mean to be a man? Because it isn't that particular group over there with the cake party. It's probably something else. And they are looking, but they really are almost embarrassed to try and find something that'll help them. As I've mentioned to you when we talked a little bit before, one of the things that we've discovered over time is there's more women coming into campus than there used to be in the early days. Some campuses that were just all male are now co-ed, and that's been going on for a while. But what we find is that a lot of the men, they're getting so outperformed. All the honor societies is about 70 to 80% women, with only about 20 to 30% men. They're getting blasted out of the water, because for some reason they've lost their way. They've lost that inner drive, which gets back to the statement that comes in with that opening video, with the boxer saying, I want to improve myself. I'm not competing with somebody else, I'm trying to compete with myself. Let's improve what I do. And that's something that I think is a message out there for many of them, because what I see is a sort of sense of, it's good enough. And I think that what we're trying to do in the fraternity is we're trying to be the best, not just so-so. And I think that's what the message I would say to some of the young college kids is, that they really need to kind of get a handle on finding some route that hits at that concept of bettering yourself, that internal drive. Our fraternity is just beautifully poised for that.
And also to be vulnerable. So when you think about one of the times that sometimes you learn the most, the fastest, and it isn't just necessarily the negative, it's sometimes to just let people be comfortable to fail small but learn big. To be able to take those small times that, I don't have to know it all. I can try, I can learn from that, I can grow, I can get better. And you take on that perspective, you learn faster, you pick up more. And all the while, you're building that track record. You're learning from yourself. You're learning about yourself. All of those things. And how do you do that? And being okay to fail small as a man. That's huge. I mean, that's. And by the way, you're not branded as a failure.
No.
These are just, again, speed bumps on your way to success and excellence. I mean, that's really what it is. And I get, when we embrace more of that, you'll get folks that's going to be able to step up their game.
There's also a funny dichotomy that we have, because the world is going so fast, things happen very quickly, and I think in the sense the lodge is a place to kind of slow things down a little bit. Things do take time, takes a little while to learn your ritual, takes a little while to figure out what leadership is all about. So you suddenly stretch time out a little bit to become more reflective. It actually gives people, the men, the chance to actually sit back and think about these things a little bit. The world is going by so quickly. They're on their phones flipping through a mile a minute. The mind needs a chance to be able to have a little self-reflection. And I think the lodge and the experience of that absolutely gives you that, while you're developing yourself, to say, I don't have to know it now and in 2 minutes. I can work at this in a safe place that says, these guys want me to succeed. It'll take a little time. It's not going to happen overnight. But boy, the payoff is going to be just glorious.
It's an investment.
It is an investment, yes.
And by the way, one of the best investments we can make is improving ourselves.
That's what it comes down to, yeah.
And oh, by the way, that's one of the reasons why I think we're here as Freemasons. I mean, it's kind of common theme kind of going on here.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. I wonder how many candidates come in the door and they have to leave their phone behind, and that's a hard thing to do, isn't it?
Withdrawal.
You're touching on the theme of communication. We've got Ron D, who submitted a question. How do we communicate with the world at large when the lessons taught to men who become Masons, and for those Masons not to discard them once they set foot outside the symbolic lodge? So really, it's how do we keep those lessons that we learn in the lodge and transcend them outside to the broader community?
Well, one is being able to learn those. So it's about knowing Masonry and living Masonry. So you touched on something, Sandy. Before I can choose to change, because that's my choice. Before I can choose to change, I need to think about, well, what does that mean to me?
Right.
And helping people come to that point. It says, okay, now that I know what that means, now I know how to live it. So it's about knowing Masonry, then actually living it, applying it. And also the reinforcement you get when you come back to Lodge. When you sit there, you're around these folks, you're in this environment, that reinforces that, those messages, those values. When you look at, I think we were talking about before, wearing a ring is as much a reminder for us in terms of the behavior. That means something. That means something profound to us. Yes, it's good for other people to see and also an opportunity to connect with other Brother Masons, but that's a reminder for us about what those symbols mean, what the lessons mean, and then how we need to govern ourselves, not just when we show up to a building, but when we actually live every single day.
Right. Well, and I think then also that the understanding that what you learn in the lodge, you practice out of the lodge. So the reference there was to how do we keep that? Well, it's all about you and it's character, but it's also the support that you get from the fellows that you're with. I mean, there are lots of Masons that socialize together outside of lodge, that travel, that go on vacations, and their wives know each other and their kids, and they make a life that they can be comfortable and confident in and be proud of. It starts with might have started by meeting somebody in the lodge, but it continues on outside.
Absolutely.
I also want to put obviously a plug for the Path Forward, because ultimately what that did was to give, in a sense, people permission to kind of really go to town with the advertising of what Freemasonry is all about. I think it's kind of been cloistered for so long, and people have kind of misinformed about how much you can say. Now it's out there. So when you have that ring and somebody sees it, it's like, wow, yes, let me tell you about what this is. And by the way, there's a wonderful video that kind of gets things going. When I show these videos to my wife, she's like, oh my gosh, she's chills. I mean, who wouldn't be affected by that? So it gives people that permission to really just, hey, let's go out. Let's do that lunch for town meeting day and say, oh, the Masons did that. Hey, did you see that video? That's those guys. It just grows. It starts with one person, but this whole Path Forward has given us that sort of, that impetus, that broad-based impetus to actually get out there with that energy.
I love Masonic license plates and I have them on my car, and it slows me down.
No, seriously.
But seriously, I do think that's part. I mean, whether you wear a lapel pin or you wear a ring, or you have something on that, or in some way you're telling the world visibly that you're a Mason. You have a responsibility to live up to that.
Yes.
And so, I am conscious of how fast I'm going when I'm heading to work in the morning and I'm late. But
you can't tarnish the lights.
Well, it's these are all questions that all of us have to face every day.
But one of the things, to pick it back on what Sandy mentioned in terms of, well, what do you say when someone comes to you and has a conversation? They might want to ask you everything under the sun, but if someone is legitimately and genuinely curious to learn about Masonry, they really want to just know two things from you. One, why did you join? And two, why do you invest your time, your talent, and your treasure with the organization? And guess what? Who's the best person to answer those questions? You. You're good.
Right. And it'll be one facet. It's obviously going to be you that gives them that experience, but hopefully the passion that you give to it will be enough to say, wow, it's like, man, that must be a great place to be.
Yeah. And then you can back that up by some stories, and we all have cool stories. And I don't know if we got enough time for some of them, but because those are the things that really connects with folks.
Okay. There's a fellow from Illinois, and I've lost his name right offhand, but he said this, he came and talked to us one time, and he said, try and explain why you're willing to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and drive 4 hours across the state for a meeting that's going to last an hour and then turn around and go back home. And yet you'll do it, and you'll do it, and you'll do it, because the value is there.
Yes.
And that's hard for the non-Mason to understand. And so, but every one of us has that story. We can all tell why we came and why we stay.
And also why we contribute.
Yes.
And I'm not talking about dollars and cents.
Right. Yeah.
It's what we get, but also what we give. Think about someone that for some reason in their career, they have a talent that's not been able to really step forward and come. But through Masonry, they actually could possibly share that talent.
Right.
They can share that talent with it. They can feel useful. You know, they can take that talent and translate that into a greater strength. All of those things, you have those opportunities.
And I think there's a lot of that out there. There's
Absolutely.
a lot of young men that are working out there, and they're not in a position to make a difference in their work yet.
Right.
Hopefully they'll rise in the ranks, but in the lodge,
absolutely,
they can practice those skills. They can practice how to communicate, how to plan an event, how to organize, how to motivate people, how to recruit people. They can do all of that and develop that resume while they're basically waiting their turn.
And your discussion with fellowship with all of them gives you an idea of where some of these people are. So when, as a leader, what are you going to look for? You're going to say, oh, I actually happen to know a guy who's probably pretty good at blank, or whatever, because you know that from your conversations. You've talked with them, get an idea, this is a person that might be good. So they may not have even thought, hey, I'd be a good whatever it is, and you come up and say, hey, I know you do this. Would you be willing to try this or help with that? And they go, oh, yeah, that's great. I didn't even think I could do something like that. That's that awareness of being in the fraternity that gives you that leverage to know something about the brothers.
Sure. We've got time for one last question. So, Ronald, I appreciate you asking this question to the panel here. Tell us about a time in your life when you felt like a man. When was that first time that you feel like you crossed that threshold? How?
You couldn't have used that one earlier.
I think for me is actually and this may seem kind of weird, but it's actually going through like a charge. And for me, the 3rd degree charge that we do, and reciting it and giving it to another person, it becomes a part of you when you have to learn ritual. This isn't something, it's not a chore. It's not something you have to go, oh, I got to do it. No, it's something you adopt. And it has stuff in there very clearly about letting the world know that a gentleman stands before them. And when you have to espouse that to a candidate, by gosh, it better be a part of you. So in a funny sense, there was that sort of delivery and really adapting that charge to me. It was like, wow, that's it right there. That's it. That's it.
When I think about some of the early times, and I'll call it my late teens, early 20s, when people literally, in roles that I was in within leadership, literally put their faith in me. That says, okay, wherever we're going because you're taking us there. and part of that is you're like, okay. But that really then says, you need to stand up. You need to step forward. There is faith that people are putting in you. They're looking for your direction and guidance. Be the best. Not only just for you, but for them too. So that concept of leadership, when you're just kind of putting that says, okay, got this. You take stock and you do the best you can because you know you have the support.
I was thinking about when I was going in for my initiation. You know, my grandfather was a Mason. My dad was a Mason. I'm on one side of the door. He's in the lodge room on the other side of the door. And I know that when I knock and I take that first step, I'm following in their footsteps. And I'm assuming a position within my family history that I never had before. I couldn't have had that outside of the lodge.
Yeah.
So
I like that. I like that one. That's a very nice one.
This is really just the beginning of these types of conversations, and we encourage everyone out there to continue these conversations with your communities, in your lodge, in your valleys, wherever you are, and whenever you're fellowshipping with men and you come across nice guys in your daily travels. Doug, Sandy, Wayne, thank you so much for being here today. Thank you for all of your contributions to the conversation and everything that you continue to do.
Oh, it's a blast.
Yeah. Good.
You have to stop?
Hour two. But thanks again to all of you out there for tuning in today and really adding to the conversation as well. So I appreciate everything that we're doing here at the Supreme Council. Thank you to all of our leaders at the Supreme Council for giving us this opportunity tonight and continuing to put the resources in the path forward and helping us grow and develop as men and as Masons. So until next time, thanks a lot, everyone. Have a good night.